Mauser's rifles have certainly earned him a place in history, but these were not his only legacy. You see, Paul Mauser also kept up a research division in his company and, thankfully, would recognize the genius of 3 of his employees. Their handgun would prove to be one of the most iconic in history, often quoted as the first truly successful automatic pistol design. Their names, however, are not often heard, as their gun would be branded by the company, Mauser. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the Mauser Construction 96 broom handle pistol. Let's take it to the light box. Our standard military C96 is going to be 12.3 inches long, 2.5 pounds in weight. It's going to chamber either 7.63 Mauser or 9mm Parabellum with a 10-round capacity. Early versions will have sights ranged from 50 to 1,000 meters, and later we'll see 50 to 500. This pistol is the product of 3 brothers. They are the Feederle brothers, Joseph, Friedrich, and Fidel. Feederle, I'm not kidding. Now, that last name is probably the most significant because he really took the lead on this project, and he would be instrumental in other Mauser designs. He was the head of the sort of experimental workshop, and he had hands in things like the development of the Mauser 98, Mauser's auto-loading rifle experiments, and he was sort of instrumental in the T-Gewehr anti-tank rifle. Rewinding the clock a little bit though, talking about 1893-ish, he is playing around with his brothers with an idea for an auto-loading handgun, and he gets a little overexcited, starts kind of working on it at work. Now, Mauser wasn't quite ready for that market at the time, and he was just a little upset that this, company money and productivity is being wasted on a personal project. So he shoos them off to work on it at home. And they do. They play with it once a week at, I believe, Joseph's house. And, they kind of keep Mauser up to date, though. It's not like he doesn't want to hear about it. He just doesn't want to see it at work. Well, now in 1893, 1894, some designs are coming to market. We see names like Bittner and Bergman, Mannlicher, and Borchardt. And they're bringing out the first semi-automatic handguns that seem to be viable. I mean, the Borchardt's really getting attention. Now, Paul Mauser wanted to stay in competition with these guys, so he contacted the Feederles, remembering their design, and asked them to bring him right back into the shop. He took personal attention on the matter, and realistically, it looks like they already had it mostly figured out anyway. So, very quickly, we see this thing worked into an actual working prototype. There's one that's noted to be done by March of 1895. Now, Mauser goes ahead and patents the pistol under his own name. I'm unsure of the details of how this was worked out, but there's no sign of the brothers becoming upset or quitting or anything like that, so it must have been chosen by all. Honestly, Mauser probably had a sort of the bigger backing to police the patent as it was. Now, they go ahead and designate their new pistol the Recoil Loader with locking block, self-loading pistol C96. Thankfully, we just call it the C96 now. It was chambered in 7.63 by 25mm Mauser, a cartridge that was frankly stolen from Borchardt. Realistically, the only difference is that Mauser crimped his cartridge. Although, because of the stronger action of the C96, the 7.63 Mauser cartridge would end up being loaded much hotter over the years. Now, the first example of this pistol wouldn't actually look quite like this. It had a more traditional hammer and a fixed rear sight. Later, this would be changed to a cone hammer, and finally this ring hammer. There was a large and small. And right away, we're going to see the fixed rear sight become adjustable tangent. Now, the gun is short recoil locking, which means that the barrel assembly has to come back a little ways before the locking block inside is cammed down and the bolt is free to go. We'll show that in a moment with the animation. You can see it here when I retract it, that everything kind of comes back and then resettles a bit. Now, it will lock open because it's meant to be fed from a stripper clip. These would normally be loaded with ammo. Mae will show you that in more detail in a moment. And unfortunately, that follower is stopping the bolt, and there's no real easy way to get that thing back where it belongs without sticking your finger in there. So give her a tug, give her a push, and then get the heck out of the way. Now, this particular model has the new safety, which means I have to manually thumb back that hammer a bit and then flip up the safety and release the hammer. That was just an improvement. We'll get there in a moment. Now, Mauser and the Feederles believed pretty strongly in this design, and they developed 3 variations right off the bat. The 10-shot that we see here, a 6-shot, and a 20-shot version. They also, like many other pistol designs at the time, went ahead and paired a stock to the action. This sets us up to have a little carbine. It works out well on this gun especially because that high bore axis makes it a little flippy when you use it one-handed. Feels a lot like an old revolver. Now, this stock also serves as a holster. It can be flipped open, and the gun set down inside. Neat. They instantly wanted to find military contracts for these things, so they talked to officials at every level they could get, and within a year managed to show their pistols to Kaiser Wilhelm II. They brought along the aforementioned models, plus a dedicated carbine with no broom handle grip. The Kaiser loved the design and was thrilled to shoot them. He also charged Mauser personally with a mission to please adapt it to an auto-loading rifle, which unfortunately never really came to fruition. You would think, with all that being said, that the C96 would have been a shoo-in for military adoption, but it gets a little trickier than that. Alright, before we skip that far ahead though, let's take a little closer look at the gun as it existed, and head over to an animation. As we go over this, note there is only one screw in the C96, and it's for the grips, not pictured here. Additionally, there are no simple pins. The hammer rotates on an extension of the sear spring. Now, we'll need to show this in layers as so many parts overlap. First, let's load the pistol from a stripper clip and remove it to release the bolt. As we pull the trigger, pay attention to the sear and hammer. For the second pass, we'll show the plungers and rocker. The left plunger presses rearward to drive the hammer. The right side plunger wraps around the rocker, pressing it into the locking block. The locking block is attached to the barrel extension, meaning the slide cannot retract until the lock is cammed down. This happens when it strikes the lock mechanism frame. The safety is a simple lever with a shaped plug, set in the left side channel of the hammer. When tipped up, it blocks the hammer from moving forward. One last point of potential confusion, there is a recoil spring wrapped around the firing pin. Inside of this is the actual firing pin spring. Alright, we'll clear the mag. And let's hand this thing over to Mae.
Let's start with the stock. Now load 10 rounds from a stripper clip. Aim and fire. Depress the hammer and safety on. This locks the hammer back, so no bang. A quick look at our damage. And 2 brief shots with the pistol. And we're back to Othais.
I'm not gonna lie, this was one of the more fun handguns to shoot that day. Now, you would think, like we said, that this gun would go on to very fruitful military contracts right away. Unfortunately, it did not. About 1,000 were bought by the Ottoman Empire. Then you had contract sales to Iran, and the Italians purchased a simplified slab-side model in 1899. Actually, because of the Italian contract, you're going to see slab-side, sort of blank-side, unmilled, flat panel C96s for a few years to come as they sort of go through the inventory. Don't worry, they come back. In the year 1902, several ideas, some old and new, sprang back up. Here we have a short barrel, fixed rear sight with reshaped grip and 6-shot capacity. These could also be fitted with an experimental articulated joint safety, which was, frankly, overcomplicated. This also marked the introduction of the 9x25mm export cartridge, basically a straight-walled 7.63mm Mauser case with a 9mm bullet. It would not prove popular, and production was limited. By 1905, we have our milled panels back, and this is where I should probably stop for a second. You see, I could film another 40 minutes of variations, and that's really not the scope of this production. As a matter of fact, we're going to need to leave some for later as it is. Instead, let's skip ahead to the 1912 military version. You see, this was a somewhat simplified pistol with the new safety that I mentioned earlier, and 6-groove rifling. It was sort of done in response to failing the German trials because the C96 lost against the Luger. And so the Army has now adopted the P08 in 9mm. These were chambered in the 9x19mm Parabellum cartridge, interestingly also derived from that original Borchardt cartridge. Here, however, George Luger had shortened up the length to get a toggle lock and angled grip into respectable dimensions. I don't think we need to say much more about this cartridge, which is still very popular today. Reaching back to World War I, which is supposed to be our focus, Germany has a huge demand on weapons with the outbreak of war, and so they immediately started buying these 1912 military models in 7.63. But they've standardized on that Luger, like we said. So they make a request from Mauser to go ahead and chamber the C96 in 9mm Parabellum. So this ends up being roughly the same model as the 1912, just quickly rechambered. And they worry a little bit about ammo mix-ups. You see, you're not going to jam a 9mm Parabellum round into a 7.63 chamber, but you could do it the other way around. And so they make a request that the C96s in 9mm be marked with a red 9 on the grip. This makes them easy to identify and reduces the unlikely accidents. Now, that's not quite the end of the C96 in World War I. A further refinement of the system was developed as the 1917 trench carbine. This model never saw real production, but it is fantastic to look at with its detachable 40-round magazine. Despite never being adopted for issue in its home country, the C96 was a commercial success. It would be sold pretty widely internationally, even though it was never an official sidearm for any real large army. Now, after 1918, there were some restrictions put on these things as part of Versailles. Biggest thing that we'll see is what is known as the Bolo model for its popularity in Russia. It's a short barrel with 7.63 chambering and no option for a shoulder stock. That's another episode. The biggest purchaser of these things, though, was China. They simply loved them, especially in the carbine configuration. They were sold in large numbers throughout the continent, and they would be used all the way through World War II. You'll see some copycats out of China, and especially the Shanxi, which came in 45 ACP. Again, another episode. Now, Astra would actually start competing in this market with a very similar looking but internally different Model 900. Now, that would inspire the later Model 30, which was a further refinement of this, to be adapted over to a select fire known as the Schnellfeuer. Now, again, these are another episode that we'd really like to cover in fine detail instead of me just rambling them out at the end of this show. So we'll limit everything to World War I, which I think we've covered pretty well to this point. So let's go ahead and get Mae's opinion on this classic pistol. All right, we have Mae again. I think we know the routine by now. So you're the star. Why don't you tell us how you felt about the C96?
Thanks. So let's start off with talking about this as the pistol, because to me, the carbine and the pistol are two totally different guns. First off, the grip, broom handle grip, famous. For me as a modern shooter, I've trained to grip up higher on guns. So for this gun in particular, I found that it kept pinching me because of these extenders, just right in between the thumb and forefinger. So it wasn't very comfortable for me for a grip. And then because of where the magazine well is located, when you're loaded 10 rounds in here, it actually makes it really front heavy. So I'm having to counterbalance it on the target, just holding it up. And then add on the fact that the barrel itself is so high up on the gun, it actually causes it to have a lot of flip. It can't handle the recoil. So I'm having to recenter myself on the target every single time. But you know, there were a couple things I really liked about it. I found the trigger was actually clean and crisp. The sights, while a little bit overcomplicated for a pistol, were clean and easy to read. And if this were the older safety, easy to one hand, but because we have the newer safety, you have to thumb the hammer back to flip the safety forward, which you have to use two hands for that. And for me as a modern shooter, that's just not that comfortable. But overall, it was definitely an interesting gun to shoot.
Well, that's a pretty complete picture, but it begs the question, what do you think of it as a carbine?
As a carbine, this gun just makes sense. I mean, the issues that we were worried about before, like with the adjustable sight not really being useful and the weight up front, everything about this just lines up as a carbine. It's like it was almost designed to be a carbine first instead of a pistol. There was no kick up, the weight was manageable. This was actually way more accurate at 50 yards as a carbine than it was at 30 feet with a pistol.
You know, that's a ringing endorsement that I actually agree with. I love the May I borrow that?
Yeah.
I love the C96 as sort of a personal defense weapon. And it's wild because, like Mae said, this is designed as a pistol, not in this original, like this is an add-on slightly after it was designed as a pistol. This is the smartest thing they did with this gun, realistically. And I understand that defensively, it's not the strongest option. It's not like you're going to draw the gun, pull this out, attach it. Tactically, yes, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're prepared and have the gun ready to go. Like we said, these were popular in China. When you look at photos, you rarely see them not already attached and ready to go. The Chinese really just like using this as a carbine, which is probably the best way to use it. All right, so you've talked about the gun sort of universally just shooting a gun. Mm-hmm. When we stop and take a moment and realize that this is a design from 1895, putting back into your mind the other things that are out there, like the Bittner and the Borchardt and things like that, from 1895, what's your real impression of this gun?
I feel that this gun was just revolutionary for its time, because think of the revolver that came before this. We shot the Reichs revolver. Comparing that to this is comparing apples to oranges. There is just no competition. This is a semi-automatic pistol that has 10 rounds in it, and you can fire it as a carbine, which is deadly accurate at 50 yards. This holds nothing holds a candle to this, in my opinion, that we've shot so far.
All right, I guess we got to get back to our classic kind of tacky question. It's World War I. You are looking at the battlefield. Would you put this in your personal kit? Would you comfortably bring it into a combat environment?
You know, overall, yes, I would. I mean, we talked about the pros and cons for this as a pistol, so for personal defense, it's a little bit hinky, but with time I could get used to it, and for training, it would be something I feel that I would be comfortable with. And I demonstrated at 30 feet that I was fairly accurate with this weapon. If I had the time and was told that I needed to go and attack a trench, and I had a moment to attach the actual carbine stock, then yes, this would actually, in that kind of scenario, I would prefer over an actual bolt action. So yes, I would definitely take this into battle.
All right, sounds like the C96 actually gets a pass. Realistically, there's a reason why this thing's a classic. We really love it. That really wraps us up for this episode. I just want to thank everybody for watching. Glad to have you. and announcements are after the credits one last time.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we're looking at another last-minute update. Sorry for the quality. I let a buddy lure me into helping him move a motorcycle halfway across the state. But good news, we're like $2 shy of $700 on Patreon. That's hugely important because that money will go towards investing in better equipment, maybe some field trips, see what we can get done for you guys. Part 2 of the improvements is that the t-shirts are available. This is actually not one of them. These are friends of the show. Our shirts are World War I inspired. They feature some of the firearms that are or will be on the show. They're so fresh that I don't even have one in yet, so some of you will probably beat me to them. Check out the link below. Additionally, I just want to say thanks one more time for being our subscribers and our viewers. Share the show, get the word out there, and otherwise, I hope you like these sort of small improvements we made on this episode. Give us the feedback. All right, bye.